Here we go. Right, welcome back to the Rugby Codebreakers. It's been a minute since we last discussed the incredible world of the oval ball game, or games. So here we are back again with my co-pilot, Lawrence.
Yeah. Hello. Always good to be back.
Yeah.
Yeah. You keep having me back, so I'll keep coming.
Yeah, indeed. So we've got a lot to get through, as always. So I think the first thing that we really want to discuss at this time of year is always the Six Nations. We've just come off the worst part of the Six Nations, the rest week.
It's exciting. It's happening. It's stopped.
Yeah, exactly. We build up ahead of steam, get properly into the tournament, and then someone says, "Right, now take a break, lads." Not ideal, but there you go. But at least it gave us time to digest the first couple of rounds. I
can see why, but there are still club matches that go on, and it's with the international. So what is even the point?
Yeah, exactly. It's not like they've stopped the club season during the other matches, when the Six Nations matches are on. But who knows? I think we did our predictions just before the Six Nations kicked off. Yours are looking better than mine because you backed the right horse in the Calcutta Cup.
Yeah. Yeah, Calcutta Cup, absolutely love that. I've seen people analysing that, most of whom have been very critical of England playing both Smith and Farrell, and then they just played Farrell in the last match and didn't look all that much more fluent, but at least they won it.
It was interesting, wasn't it? This debate over can you accommodate both of them? Matt Dawson had written on BBC that he felt that Steve Borthwick had kind of tied himself down by making Farrell his captain. Basically, he's tied his hands a little bit because if you drop Farrell and keep Smith, it's a huge story because you've dropped your captain.
Yeah.
It just leaves him a little bit less free to experiment with what the best combination is.
And it's kind of awkward having the Harlequins offensive coach as well, which is where he'll know what Marcus Smith can do. Matt Smith, it's not Doctor Who. And he'll know. Likewise, Smith will know what the coach wants in a way that's going to be much more instinctual than Farrell does. And then you go and pick the other fly half that your coach doesn't know. It seems a bit strange.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I suppose obviously Owen Farrell brings a whole ton of experience, and seems to have the respect of his teammates as a leader on the pitch, which is
just
important.
Not as a tackler.
No, perhaps not as a tackler. And goal kicking wasn't super hot during the Calcutta Cup match. There were a couple of.
I was absolutely bricking it when Finn Russell hit the post with that conversion. I thought you're going to throw away points like that, you're going to get bitten for it. But in the end, Van der Merwe very much bailed us out.
Well, I think Scotland were the deserved winners for me. Not by that much, perhaps. I think Scotland were just much more clinical than England. It seemed like England needed about 5 times as much ball to achieve anything as Scotland did.
I think both of the Scots opening matches, they've had less possession, less territory, and been deserving winners on both occasions. Against the Welsh, I think the first half was something like 60% territory and 60% possession to the Welsh, and yet they'd made less meters in terms of running gains and less points. And again, the English kind of look where Scotland were 2-3 years ago when they weren't quite sure where the try line was.
Yeah. Recycling the ball through a lot of phases, but not quite with any real thrust and penetration about them. As I say, it makes you feel like they need an awful lot of ball to get over the line. And that, as you said, that's what Scotland used to be about. They'd do everything right in the game. They'd defend manfully. They'd tackle hard, and they'd recycle the ball a lot. You'd get it through a lot of phases, but ultimately it would go nowhere, and they'd find themselves getting burned at the other end.
Yeah.
Now, Scotland look clinical, and I think if I was a Scottish fan,
the last Scottish possession where leading to Van der Merwe's second, there was no doubt in any of the Scottish players of what they were going to do with that ball. They were going to march down the field. They were going to do what they had to do to win.
Yeah,
and there's a confidence in the Scottish team that is quite unsettling for a Scot to see.
Yeah, I mean, if I was Scottish, perish the thought, but we'll run with it for a moment. I think I would have been even more pleased with the Wales win than the Calcutta Cup, for the simple reason that Scotland sides in the past would have totally followed up a good Calcutta Cup win by losing to an awful Welsh side.
And the Welsh have been an ongoing bogey team for Scotland as well.
Indeed. I mean, of course, Gatland, going into that, had never failed to beat Scotland, ever, coaching anyone.
Interesting stats for this season. First time Scotland have put together back-to-back bonus point wins. First time Scotland have picked up bonus point wins against a team that's not Italy.
Yeah, that's quite impressive. I mean, to be honest, after the first couple of games, I'm thinking, as you say, perhaps Scotland for second place now. And who knows? It only needs one good performance against the Irish and catch the Irish on an off day, and it'll be championship.
This does make me think. I think we've got the French up next, and I think that's in Paris. Because if we're in London, then we're going to be in Paris, I think.
Yeah, and that's a big game. If Scotland can go to France and win, then there'll be 3 from 3, and they'd have to be fancying themselves for the championship at that point. Certainly, they'd have to be playing as people who wouldn't be playing just to get second place and go, yay, we had a good campaign anymore. They'd be saying, right, this is there to win, and we've got to go and win it.
I think the Scots can go to Paris not expecting to win, but definitely not expecting to lose. And this is one that's definitely up in the air. It's a tough one to pick, and I think I'd be intrigued to know what a neutral thinks. But as someone with an interest in the match, I think we could take it. The home field advantage is what worries me.
It is. I think it's a big ask for any team to go to Paris and win these days. France hadn't lost a match last season, the whole of 2022. Obviously, they were well beaten by Ireland to deserve, but that was away from home. As I say, I don't think anyone would relish the thought of going to Paris at the minute.
No.
But Scotland, as you say, they look like they have a proper belief in themselves, and they're organised, and they've got a couple of genuine star quality players in there. Finn Russell's the fly half of the tournament so far.
Yeah, there's no way you can drop him now. I don't think he's cemented in there.
Absolutely. If there was a Lions tour this year, he'd be the first name on the team sheet for that as well, I think.
Yeah. Especially with Sexton ruled out currently through injury.
Yeah. And as we will have a look later, they got arguably the most dangerous winger in the tournament as well. So.
Yeah, Van der Merwe is looking Lomu-esque in the Six Nations so far.
Yeah.
He's breaking tackles, he's making meters, and he's both scoring and creating at the moment.
Yeah.
I said beforehand that he was going to need to have a good tournament, and he started on fire.
Yeah, absolutely. He looks like 3 more games like that, and he'll have really established himself in World Cup year as one of the most dangerous players in the world.
Yeah, I've seen some Six Nations analysis from Kiwi rugby YouTubers who've been touting him as one of the genuine world-class players in the Six Nations.
Yeah,
and
I
a lot of
think
people wondering if South Africa are going to find some way to get him back.
yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I think that's it's a fair assessment, and the only thing, as I say, the only thing stopping Scotland winning this championship the way they're playing are it's a tough ask to go to Paris, and Ireland do look so good, Sexton or no Sexton.
This tournament's also throwing up some interesting repercussions for the World Cup, where I think you now, with the rise of Scotland through the rankings, I think you now have something like 3 of the top 5 teams in the world in the same group in the World Cup.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, isn't it?
Scotland now
talk
ranked
about groups of
5,
death.
Ireland at 1, and always nice to see Scotland go past England in the rankings.
Mm. Yeah, very nice for you, I'm sure. I think, as you say, you get it. There's always in a World Cup people talk up which is the group of death. You're like, spoiled for choice in this World Cup. But I think Italy as well. I really fancy now to at least finish ahead of Wales. I think this weekend Wales playing England. It's so huge for Wales after the disruption of the contract row and whether they would strike or not. And the form they've been in, they really, really need to show up and win this game.
Yeah, and the trouble is, the Welsh haven't just lost; they've been bad in losing.
Exactly. Scotland took them to the cleaners. Let's face it; it was a record victory. And as you say, it's not like Wales didn't have the ball. They had the space and ball to do something. They just didn't. They just weren't able to.
Yeah, they were ahead on so many of the stats in the game as well, except for the points. They did a lot of things correctly, just not actually well.
Yeah, their confidence must be on the floor at the moment. In some ways, this whole contracts row may have worked to their advantage. I think because at least it's meant they haven't been dwelling on their poor form. They've had other things to think about. That might actually be a blessing for them. I suppose we should discuss that for the moment because I mean it's literally today we found out. Yes, the game against England is definitely going ahead. They're not on strike, which is great for everyone involved in rugby, but also especially great for the Welsh Rugby Union, who would lose out on about £10 million if that match didn't go ahead. Such as the massive draw of the Six Nations.
Sorry, I just had to make sure that I didn't get disconnected.
Yeah, fair enough.
For some reason, the battery wasn't charging.
Tech solutions.
Yeah.
But the Welsh players had 3 main demands going into this. I think number one, they wanted a representative in the professional rugby board meetings. To me, that's a no-brainer. Any discussions that affect players should have a player's voice involved.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And to be fair, that one has been granted straight away. They wanted movement on the 60 cap rule, whereby players are only allowed to represent Wales when they play their domestic rugby in another country. If they've already earned 60 caps or more, that's going to be cut to 25 caps now.
So they want to go after the money in France.
Yeah, exactly. And finally, of course, there was the fact that the Welsh Rugby Union wanted them to play for contracts where only 80% of their fee would be guaranteed, and the other 20% would be in bonuses. They've worked a compromise there whereby players can choose to take a slightly lower guaranteed contract or take the flexible contract with the bonuses as an attempt to get something more. So I think that was a reasonable compromise, because I think the players probably recognise, I'm sure everyone else does, that despite these big sums of money that the £10 million that I just talked about for the Six Nations game, Welsh Rugby Union is in a parlous state financially. So there isn't a magic money tree to just constantly say, oh, here, have more money. But what the players want is certainty, which is understandable. Everyone wants it in these times. They want
I
to.
feel like I
They
need
want to
to
know
have a
how
look at
much they're
what the
getting and
difference is
when.
between the Scottish Rugby Union and the Welsh Rugby Union in terms of structure. Because Scotland's got two main regions in Glasgow and Edinburgh, but a lot of the players do play abroad.
Yeah.
So I think most of their money is going to come through the Murrayfield fixtures.
Sure, definitely. Be interested to see how much effect it has on the home nations when you're in a year where you only have 2 home games in the Six Nations. You know, it's a big difference, isn't it? But I think there's a feeling in Wales that maybe 4 regions is unsupportable with the resource that they've got. That they need to trim it back. Maybe 2 regions would be more sensible for Wales as well. I don't know. It's a balancing act, isn't it? Because you don't want to cut off pathways for players to develop. We discussed last time, I don't see any problem with letting players go and play abroad if the opportunities are there for them. I firmly believe you get this debate in Super League a lot in Rugby League where people talk about players leaving the Super League to go to Australia to play in the NRL, and people say, "Oh, it weakens our competition." I just think everyone that leaves is a spot for another young player to take.
Yeah, and then these people invariably come back as well.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I don't see a problem with that, and reducing the 60 cap rule to 25 is absolutely fine. I don't see why you can go further and just say, do we actually need a rule?
Well, one of the issues I know that
Welsh
Gatlin was
players
talking
in
about with
Wales.
the Welsh Rugby League may well be a thing for Super League as well, where Gatlin was talking about the Welsh clubs and provinces pulling in players from overseas, but they weren't pulling in great players from overseas. They were pulling in journeymen.
Yeah.
And a foreign journeyman is taking a place that a Welsh player could have taken and been developed into.
Yes.
So by all means, bring across the good foreign players. What you don't want is a team full of coal pack players who are never going to get anywhere near an international side, never going to add to the value of the side, and just going to stop you bringing through homegrown youngsters for a ready-made player of the same ability.
Yeah, exactly. If you can bring in some foreign players with good experience and everything, that is a useful thing to have. You can use them to pass on some skills and knowledge to those young players you're bringing through. But at the same time, as you say, if you're just bringing in players who are no better than what you've already got, what's the point? You're stifling your own player development pathways, and you're not actually putting bums on seats. If you're signing a top foreign player, people might turn out for that. It's worth it just for the marquee value, the name. But to be fair, rugby is, even rugby union with its bigger international profile, it's still not football, and there's not that many players out there, I think, that you can sign that will make a genuine huge impact on ticket sales. And I don't see any of them going to play in Wales because the money's
got
just
the
not there
likes
to
of
attract.
the names of the caliber of sort of Dan Carter, Johnny Wilkinson. Again, they're going to France.
Exactly. If you've got a Sonny Bill Williams or someone coming through and thinking, I'll head out of New Zealand and make myself big money, France is where they're going.
I actually view it as a bit of a coup for Bath to get Finn Russell to come back to Britain from France.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson.
Definitely. If they can just stay in the Premiership.
I wonder if his contract is contingent on that.
You'd think there's probably some sort of clause. He's not coming to play second tier.
No.
Not at this stage of his career. But who knows? If they've offered him enough money, he might think, well, whatever, one season. And after what happened with Saracens, of course, we've now seen that it is possible to play to keep playing internationals from the second tier. So,
and indeed from bankruptcy.
Yeah. But overall, it's been an exciting and interesting start to the Six Nations. As I say, Ireland are in pole position. France and Scotland both have the ability to upset them, I think. Obviously France will be disappointed that they were first up against Ireland and they got beaten, but they'll be thinking, we win the rest of our games. We only need Ireland to slip up once, and we could still have this championship. And Scotland are also there.
One more try and we would have been first on points difference, which is uncanny.
Yeah.
5 points
England,
off.
I can't see England finishing below Italy and Wales. So it seems to me that Italy and Wales are going to fight out the wooden spoon, and England
are going to beat Wales. And then it's a shootout.
If England can finish third from this position, they'll have done well. But I suspect fourth is now where they're going to end up. And that might not be a disaster for them still. It's World Cup year. As long as they have enough, as long as they show enough progress over the next three matches to be going into the World Cup with a little bit of momentum, that might be good enough, given that it's a new coaching team. We shall see. But speaking of world champions and world championships, of course, in rugby league, we had St Helens taking on Penrith in Australia in the World Club Challenge, and they won, which really virtually nobody was giving them a chance of doing. Even the St Helens fans that I've chat to on rugbyleaguefans.com were all saying, I think we'll do well, we'll give them a game, but none of them were actually saying, I think we're going to win.
I wonder if they thought the game was going to go that way. So I've actually found myself watching it and was surprised to see Saints taking a 10-0 lead. Wondered if they should have had more, but I was slightly confused at the toothlessness of the Aussie side. They until they actually started scoring, they didn't look like scoring.
No, it's true. And then, of course, the way it went down at the end, I honestly thought when they drew level, that was it. And
that's normally when they go on to pull away.
Yeah, I thought, well, Saints have put up a great effort. What a pity that it's going to end in an annoying defeat. But St Helens, fair play to them, huge mental strength, I think, to pick themselves back up, and
especially after the number of drop goals they missed.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, Jack Wellesby at fullback had such a terrific game, scoring a try, making a try, involved in everything, and then dropping the ball in, what was it, the 79th minute or something, to let Penrith get that equalising try. I thought he really, really does not deserve that to be the abiding memory.
They've done so well under the bomb the entire game, and the one time that it went wrong in the worst possible way.
Yeah, exactly. So I was glad that they pulled through. As I said, being a Wigan fan, I'm not never going to be particularly cheering for St Helens, but after some of the things that have been said in the Aussie press, I was pretty glad that they won.
I think as someone who's Wigan adjacent, I'm glad that St Helens won. wouldn't want them to do it again, but
No. They deserved it. They were the better team on the day. It's after England's disappointing exit in the Rugby League World Cup semi-final. It was a bit of a shot in the arm for the English game that it needed, I think, for Saints to go down there and win in Australia. And I mean, we saw Phil Gould, who's one of the most successful Australian coaches, say the week before that Penrith would be able to declare by half time against St Helens. To be fair to him afterwards, I expected that he would do what often happens with the Aussie pundits in these and just blame Penrith being underdone for the defeat. But instead, he very fairly said, yeah, it was the first game of the season for Penrith, but they've had months to prepare. So there can be no excuses.
so from watching the game, I saw that the guys on comms were very much taken with Wellesby at fullback, and I was wondering if you reckon there's any potential shopping lists being drawn up as a result of that game.
I think Wellesby will definitely be a target for a lot of the Australian clubs. I think he probably already was. That will have really cemented in a lot of people's eyes that a lot of people in Australia will now be saying, okay, it's not just talent he's got, but he can actually do it against our best on the big stage.
Big game mentality.
He's only a young player still, Wellesby. In his very early 20s still, but he's won Super League 4 times now with St Helens. So to a large extent, he'll be thinking as well, what is there left for him in this country?
Yeah, he'll look at the
He's done
NRL as the
everything.
next step.
Yeah, he'll get paid more. He'll get to sample the Aussie lifestyle, and if he can be as successful down there as he has been for Saints over the last few years, he could really build himself a huge legacy as a player. And I think from an England fan's perspective, would do us no harm at all to have him playing in the NRL.
So St Helens, NRL, rugby union defense coach.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it works, isn't it? And plenty more money to come from that role for him at some point. I think some of the other players that would have been interesting to Australians are probably a little bit too old for making the move now.
Any
Johnny
Australians they might want
Lomax.
back?
Well, Sirenen had a pretty good game for St Helens, didn't he? Curtis Sirenen. So I could see some people calling for him at some point.
Who was the big one who scored the second try?
Oh, you put me on the spot now, and I've forgotten.
Hurl. The Hurl King.
Conrad Hurl, yeah, the Tongan, yeah. I think he's probably the thing with Hurl is he's great go forward player. He scores tries. He's really hard to stop close to the line because he's so massive. His effort is fantastic, and he's a really good guy. But you're always going to get a couple of errors from him in any match. He's probably going to be caught out of position in defence at some point. So he's a bit of a mixed bag. I think the positive far outweighs the negative from him, but the negative can be costly in big games occasionally. So I'm not sure if an NRL club would go back in for him at this stage, and I think he's really happy in St Helens. So, I think he had a point to prove when Saints signed him because he'd come over, he'd played for Leeds, he hadn't set the world on fire, and he said himself that he could tell when St Helens signed him, a lot of the St Helens fans were thinking, why on earth have we signed him? So he knuckled down, determined to force his way into the first team and prove that he was worth it. And as I say, I think on balance, he is worth it. But if all of St Helens players are fit, I think he's struggling to nail down a first team place regularly, because they have got a lot of good backs.
So with Super League coming up then, and despite the shocking start from your mob, he's going to stop Saints this year.
Well, that is the big question that everyone's asking, and I think at the moment you'd have to say St Helens look very good value for a fifth straight title. Warrington started the season really well with a good win over Leeds last week. But Warrington started last season with a good win over Leeds, and then nearly got relegated. So maybe we don't read too much into that yet. Wigan, as you say, had a very poor start. They were all right in the first half against Hull KR, but they were never in the game in the second half. So that was a worry, because I think most people honestly would have been saying that Wigan are probably the most likely competition to Saints out of anybody. That's a bit of an easy pick, given that Wigan finished second last season and won the cup. I'd say Catalan Dragons though as well.
Yeah.
I would
I'd
throw
love to
them
see
in the mix.
Dragons win.
Yeah, they've been there or thereabouts the last few years under Steve McNamara. He's taken them to a grand final. They won the Challenge Cup before that. They signed Tom Johnston from Wakefield, who, I've talked about him on this show before. I think when he's fully fit, he's the best winger in Super League. He started the season with a hat-trick against his old club away from home last week. So I think if he stays fit, which is always the question with him, he gives Catalans a big upgrade on what they had before. And they already had a couple of decent wingers. But he's something special. They've also got a lot of players out injured at the moment. So although their first match was Wakefield, who, sad to say, are probably going to be one of the teams struggling to avoid relegation this season, still Wakefield had home advantage, and Catalans were missing a lot of their biggest names, and still went there and did a job on them.
Yeah. My perennial question about the Catalans is how many actual Catalans?
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. There's enough French players there and enough young French players coming through that I feel like they're getting it right these days.
Any actual Spanish players?
Not as far as I'm aware. I know there have been around the youth area. Whether I may be wrong, someone could probably inform us. But I can't think off the top of my head of a Spanish player in the squad at the moment. That said, of course, we just had the draw for the European Championship at the end of this season in Rugby League, and Spain are taking part in that. So,
nice.
We've also had confirmation that it will be England Knights taking part in that tournament, not the full England side, which is a mixed bag. On the one hand, it's great experience for the Knights, and it will make for more competitive matches. But on the other hand, I know some of the other teams in there, that the likes of France and Scotland, would have liked it to be the full England team, because they feel it disrespects the tournament a little by having essentially a B team taking part. We've got Serbia in there as well.
Do you want a chance at winning it?
Well, there is that, you see. But of course, they're not just playing for winning in that European Championship. What we do know is the two highest ranked sides behind France and England qualify for the World Cup in 2025 out of this tournament. France are already qualified because they're the host nations. England are already qualified on the basis of being semi-finalists in the World Cup just gone. So, yeah, even if it were England,
coming out of that?
Sorry?
Any potential surprises coming?
Well, let's say we've got Serbia in there, who won the European B last season, so they got themselves promoted to the big time. They're going to be in there with the England Knights. Spain and Italy are in the tournament. Italy, of course, have been one of those teams where, because of Australian players of Italian descent, they've always been able to put a half decent squad together. If they can, whether they can turn that into inspiring more Italian players to come through, I don't know. But I feel like for countries like that, this is a real shop window at the end of the season. I think teams in Super League and in the Championship over here will be watching some of those countries and thinking, you know what? There's going to be players who would love to come over and play full time. And we'll be able to see them taking on the French and the England Knights, and we'll get a good idea of whether they've got what it takes to mix it at Super League level. And if they can do that, then that points out a pathway, doesn't it? If you're a younger Italian player or Spanish player and you see someone get signed by Leeds or Wigan, or even Lee or Featherstone or someone like that, you're still thinking, oh, I can actually make a go of this. Yeah. So we'll look forward to it. But what we still don't know is who the full England team will be playing, if anyone. Because the big problem, we still have this huge row over contracts among the Australian players in the NRL, and they are talking still about downing tools and not playing the opening game of the NRL season. It's coming that close. There's a huge amount of money in the Australian game. Most of it comes from TV and sponsorship, and the players think that they should have a bigger share of it, particularly with a focus not so much on their playing career, but on the years after their playing career. They want more money set aside for 5, 10, 15 years after you finish playing, because physically it is a brutal and demanding sport. On the other hand, there are people in Australia who are saying, but part of the reason you guys get such big wages is so you can make provision for yourself.
Yeah, that's the idea of it, isn't it?
Yeah, so you're kind of asking to have your cake and eat it. Give me the big money now, but also pay my future problems off for me. I don't know if we'll get a resolution, but until we get a resolution, no international matches can be planned, really, because nobody knows what's going to happen. As we said on the last show, Tonga are keen to come over and play a series against England. England would love to have them. I would love to go and watch those matches, but we've no idea whether it's actually going to happen or not. We shall have to hope for the best.
Yeah.
So, that said, one other story that I wanted to draw attention to, just not for the specific incident itself, but just for the potential implications for the game, is we're seeing at the moment, we've seen a woman's rugby player suing an opponent for damages of up to £10 million after a tackle that left her paralysed from the waist down. And as I say, I don't want to get into the specifics of it. The case has already been heard. We're awaiting a judgment. But it feels like this is a very dangerous and slippery slope for contact sports generally, never mind specifically rugby.
I just don't see how they can prove malice.
No.
I can't see how they can prove it to be anything than an accident, because no one's going to intend to do that to someone. And I don't see, as well, as a lawsuit for £10 million is going to be feasible for a women's rugby player. It's not like they make the big bucks.
No, indeed. I think it would be very hard to argue that for a player who gets paralysed, which is obviously a shocking and devastating outcome, that you were unaware that was a possibility in rugby. It's happened too many times, even though it is a freak and unusual occurrence. It's happened enough times that every rugby player taking the field knows that is an outside chance that could happen.
And if the civil suit comes through, then surely there would have to be some sort of criminal prosecution as well to follow.
Indeed. It's a tough one, and obviously you feel for any player who's in that position where they get such life-altering and permanent injuries. But I don't see the implications for the future of the game would be just huge, and we've seen in the past every so often I've seen people talk about criminal prosecutions for foul play, because people talk like when Ben Flower a few years ago in the Super League Grand Final when he punched Lance O'Hire for and got sent off for Wigan against Saints, picked up a huge ban, but people were rightly saying if he did that out on the street,
Yeah, it would be assault.
He'd be prosecuted and he could go to jail. But on the other hand, you think, yeah, but it wasn't out on the street. But and that's happened many times before, and nobody's ever brought a criminal case. I think it is accepted that these are contact sports. I think we talked about the players suing over dementia, and there I think that those players do have more of a case because they can reasonably say, in my opinion, I knew that the game of rugby carried massive physical risks. I did not know that there was a risk of getting dementia in my 40s or 50s, early onset dementia, because I don't think generally people really understood that.
Yeah.
To the extent that we're beginning to now. But in terms of spinal injuries, yeah, everybody knows that risk.
This is one of the things that surprised me somewhat about watching the St Helens match. I've watched very little rugby league in recent years, but I was looking at some of the tackles that went in and thinking there would be a number of yellow cards in this game if it was a union match. There's a number of high tackles and tackles which started on the chest and rode up into the face. A lot of seatbelt tackling and a whole load of neck rolling.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because these are all things that have been clamped down on to an extent in rugby league, and it shows you that there's still a difference and that there's you got a lot of rugby league fans who are saying, "Oh, the game's been sanitized too much now." You think, well, actually, no. You could still say there's still work to be done on. I think probably a World Club Challenge is always going to be refereed a little bit differently to your average game as well, because it's kind of not necessarily a once in a lifetime thing, but it's something that's not going to come around very often for most players.
Yeah.
So I think refs probably do allow a little more latitude than they would in some games. But yeah, it's an interesting one. But as far as I can tell, I don't see how you could bring a case. As you say, you'd have to show surely that there was real malice and a real intent to injure. And you don't really get that. The only one I can think of is, I remember the Kiwi player, Isaac Luke, a few years ago, probably about 10 years ago now, I think, admitted that he had deliberately tried to break the leg of England's Rangi Chase in an England-New Zealand match. The reason being that he'd given was that Chase had been, born and bred in New Zealand. He's actually Luke's cousin. Had chosen to play for England after qualifying for England, after playing here for a number of years, and Luke said not just he, but quite a few of the Kiwi players took this very personally, thought it was disrespectful to the country, and he said, "I saw red and I went for him." And he deliberately tried to break his leg, didn't, got a 2-game ban. You think, hang on, a 2-game ban for a confessed attempt to, potentially end someone's career. It's quite extraordinary, isn't it? Yeah. Looking back, you think that'd be like 6 months, shouldn't it, or something? Yeah. That's the only incident I can think of where we actually know a player set out to do that kind of harm to another player. Because, there's definitely plenty of incidents where a player sets out to hurt another player, but it's not to cripple another player. It's just to put a good shot on them and, rattle them properly.
One of my favourite punishments that I've seen, if you can have a favourite punishment, was from the NHL, where I think it was a Vancouver player, rabbit punched a guy, fractured his skull, and the penalty given down by the league for that was you come back when he does.
Mm. Yeah, that seems reasonable. I think it'd be an interesting one, but I always think it's very hard to judge what a fair punishment is, because people will rightly say, if you crock our star player, you go in with a high shot, knock him out and everything, get away with it, and then the match review panel the following week bans you for 4 games. You think that's 4 games you're not playing against other people, but we've not been compensated in any way. The club that was actually injured by this.
Which is where things like citing in union has been criticised as well. I'm not gonna take any action, but I'm gonna put that on report.
Yeah.
What good does that do us? You put him on report, so he misses the next game, whereas you could have sin-binned him.
Yeah, exactly.
And given us 10 minutes.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? And plus, you always get into questions of intent and everything. You're like, a player could get badly injured in a relatively innocuous tackle, and you could say, "Oh, right, well, we're banning the guy for 3 months for that because that's how long this guy's going to be injured, and he's hardly touched him." And then at the same time, you can get someone who, genuinely swings for someone else's head, doesn't quite hit them. There's no real harm done, but you think, yeah, but you were setting out to do major injury. But then you get into the case of the referees needing to judge intent. And my own personal view is you should avoid forcing referees to make those kinds of judgment calls as much as possible. Far better,
sometimes
in my
it's
opinion,
clear,
to
but
say.
you don't want to go into too much nuance.
No, exactly. I want referees to be able to be consistent and to say, this is a high shot, this is not. And I'm not going to worry too much about trying to guess what the intent behind something was, because I think that way everybody knows where they stand. Players, fans, everyone.
Coming full circle back to the Six Nations again, I feel that the standard of refereeing in the tournament has been very high so far. The referees have been consistent, they've been clear, and they've been. I think they've made the right decision for the most part.
Yeah, I agree, and they've let games flow without letting stuff go. I think they've done a really good job. Honestly, I feel that referees get too much criticism anyway. There are times when I've watched games and thought, "Oh God, the referee, keep that whistle out of your mouth, mate. You're ruining it." Or they've got big calls wrong. But I think generally, both codes of rugby are really, really difficult games to referee. Rugby league is a mile a minute; it never stops moving. Rugby union has got loads of arcane laws and 30 bodies on the pitch at any one time that the referee's got to keep track of. This is a really difficult job to run those games, and we can't have games without referees. So I really think people need to dial back the criticism sometimes.
Was it league that was thinking about having 2 referees?
Well, they did in Australia, of course. Yeah, effectively one to police the defensive line at each tackle. So you can have one guy stood with the team in possession and one guy stood with the team defending and getting back the 10 meters and everything. I think there was some thought of whether or not we should follow suit over here, but the plain fact of the matter is we don't have enough referees to do that. And it did create a sort of 2-tier refereeing, because even in Australia, you're getting 2 referees at the elite level, but you're not getting that at every game throughout. So I think it is difficult, but by and large, as I say, I think the refs do a pretty good job. And the sad truth is, it's hard to keep them. Referees get burned out. At the lowest levels, they suffer tremendous abuse from fans and from players sometimes, and it's just not acceptable.
Yeah.
Keep them in the game.
So by the refereeing talk almost brought us full circle round to the Six Nations properly, so we could have a look at some tries again.
Yeah, I think I'll bite the bullet, and because we've got a couple of tries to look at here. I'm going to share my screen.
Strangely, both these tries are my selection this week.
Yeah, odd that.
But this first one is definitely a worldie.
Oh, yeah.
There's some subtle blocking from the Scots, and then power, pace.
And let's not forget, that's a back row forward he's fended off at the end. It's not the fullback who's come across.
They pointed out as well that you see him as he's stepping the penultimate tackler, he's transferring the ball across to the other hand so he can make the fend.
So he can do the fend, yeah. He's done everything right. And as I said, he's shown tremendous balance. He's picked his lines perfectly. He can step off both feet and does so. At first, I thought, watching that as it happened, I thought, my God, that's shocking defending. And a lot of people have said that. But watching it back, I'm like, actually, most of those tacklers never stood a chance. You know?
Yeah. And now for the final funsies.
Yeah.
This is where, again, Scotland were never doubting themselves. They knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah. And you're just not going to stop a guy like that from there. But that was a really well-worked try. As you say, they'd pulled England apart on one side of the pitch, then they'd moved the ball quickly and cleverly across to the other side of the pitch, and finally got it into the hands of the right man. And yeah, who would want to try and tackle him?
Yeah, arms like legs.
Yeah, definitely. This is a great rundown on the right-hand side. Quick recycling.
Quick recycle.
Yeah. And then this is just smart passing. You know what they're not doing, which Jonathan Davies has talked about a lot. Good step off, and no stopping him from that once he's that close to the line. They didn't waste time or risk things by going for cut-out passes. They knew they didn't need to. One man to the next man to the next man, because they've already made the space.
So the pass on from I think it's Richie Gray was good, quick hands. He takes the ball in front of him so that he can move it straight through to the next guy. And Ferguson, I think it is on the outside, not drawing the man, and just follows the epithet of give it to the pace in space. No need to delay the pass. Give it to Dewey, and off he goes.
Yeah, I see a lot of players sometimes. They'll float a missed pass out because they think that's going to make the space. I'm gonna miss a man or miss two men, but that takes the pace off the movement, and actually the line just shifts alongside with it, and you've achieved nothing, and possibly risked an intercept by throwing that risky Hail Mary pass. Whereas this time they're like, no, we don't need to do that. We've made space. No, we just need to shift the ball sensibly. And as you say, that last pass from Gray, very nice. And then a good step in again. Yeah, great tries. Pity they were against England.
Yeah, I think that makes it better myself.
I thought you might. Well, I'll just have to console myself with the vast amount of times we've beaten you in the past. Though not in the last 3 years.
When it pays off for us, it pays off big there.
Yeah, 3 in a row now. That's quite something.
Is it 5 and 6?
Yeah, it's amazing, really, isn't it? Because
probably the best decade Scotland have had for that sort of thing.
Yeah, go back not that many years. and tell people, oh yeah, Scotland can have England 5 out of the next 6, and people would go, are you mad? We're looking to get 1 out of the next 6.
I think that 30-all draw was the thing that gave the Scots the belief that they could do it against England.
Yeah. All in all, Van der Merwe could be the star of the World Cup, never mind the Six Nations. We shall see. Scotland will be hoping he doesn't get cropped or suspended. Yeah. We shall see, as I say. I mean, I think that pretty much brings us to the end of this particular instalment of the Rugby Codebreakers. We didn't have a big tackle this week. There was something else I wanted to show, but I haven't managed to track down the video in time. So I'll work on that for the next one. But I think anybody who hasn't seen it really does need to see Steve-O and the ostrich, and that's all I'm going to say.
I am intrigued.
Yeah, and also there's a couple of tries that I think we'll be looking at in weeks to come. Martin and Fire may feature heavily in those, because there's a couple of absolute belters of his that I think are due a look.
There's at least one try that could possibly qualify as iconic.
Indeed, and I think there's another one that's just as good but never gets the attention. But I haven't found a video for it yet that I can share. As soon as I do, we'll be having a look at that. And also, I think we are overdue a look at the Clash of the Codes and revisiting Bath and Wigan in 1996. It was a fascinating, interesting idea.
And one of our rugby bonding moments.
Indeed, and there's a lot of footage out there that we can have a look at. I think perhaps next time we really ought to make time to discuss that a little bit. It's not something that would be worth doing all the time, but I think at that time it was absolutely worth doing. And it was exciting and enjoyable, and gave a lot of players a chance to strut their stuff on a different stage.
Yeah.
And there was one other thing that I really wanted us to look at, which was, of course, the history of rugby, which we started looking at and then aborted. So I absolutely promise
we will go back to it.
Yeah, we will look at the earliest part of rugby, of the history of rugby football. That is when rugby football broke away from association football and the Rugby Football Union began life. It's an interesting story. And maybe not quite the story that some people think it is.
So yeah, if people have made it this far, thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you
please
for watching,
like, comment, subscribe, all that bit.
Yep. Definitely like, subscribe, share, and comment. And find us on Facebook. We would, please, yeah, it's lovely. But no, thank you very much for watching, and we will be back again very soon for more of the Six Nations. By then, Super League will be well and truly underway. Oh yeah, also one little mention. Just another nice thing for Ireland. Of course, we had the first round of the Challenge Cup, and Dublin City Exiles became the first Irish side to win a match in the Challenge Cup and reach the second round.
Oh, nice! We made it.
Yep. So this weekend we have the second round. We will be having the Dublin back, but we will also have the first ever Challenge Cup tie played in Cornwall, as Cornwall play their first Challenge Cup tie of the season.
Nice.
So that's another little bit of history. That one will be available to watch on BBC for anyone who's interested. At 1 o'clock, maybe a little appetizer for the Six Nations if anyone's looking for one.
Good stuff.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Leave it there, and I hope everyone's enjoyed it.
Yeah. I think we're clear.